This video contains Jujutsu Kaisen manga spoilers. You've been warned. After over 1100 days, Satoru Gojo has finally been broken out of the prison realm, and it really seemed to be perfect timing, with Sukuna having taken over Megumi's body and taming Maharaga. The death of Yuki and the loss of Tengen to Kenjaku made it seem as though there was absolutely no hope within the Jujutsu Kaisen world. Sure, they still had Yuta around, but that didn't seem to be enough. And when Kenjaku considered that Yuta was a bit overhyped, it made me and many other fans fear that maybe he had something up his sleeve so as to make it so that Yuta wasn't really a threat to his plans in the Cooling Games. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, the gang reunited with the angel Hana Karusu and went forth with the unsealing of their last hope. Yes, finally there would be a light within the darkness. Upon activating Jacob's ladder, Gojo would be released from the space and immediately goes to confront Kenjaku. Now there are plenty of interesting things that are implied in chapter 221, and one of the things I do want to focus on for this video is the idea that this is absolutely not the same Gojo that we are left off with well over 100 chapters ago when he was first imprisoned by Kenjaku. No, Gojo is likely far more powerful than he was then. You might not have noticed this because it wasn't directly stated. Even though I do believe it's pretty straightforward, there are still plenty in the fandom that I've seen online attempting to rebuke the claim that Gojo is currently stronger than he was. So I think it's best to start with explaining the implications that Gojo just reached his new limits. I think that one of the most striking things about Gojo's return is his physical presence. Man looks beefy now. Bro took his time in prison a little bit too realistically and used that time to level up. I'd probably say that most people consider Gojo to look a lot more muscular than he was before, but I have seen people arguing that Gojo actually isn't more buff at all, but rather he's always had this type of build. It had just been concealed by his jacket, which was baggy. And I will admit that it is true that wearing baggy clothes is a great concealer. I remember being classmates with this dude for years and always thought he was pretty scrawny because he always wore very baggy jeans and a baggy sweater. But then I ended up having strength and conditioning class with him my senior year, and I was surprised at how jacked the dude was. But I don't think this is the case at all when it comes to Gojo's new physique and strength. I'm actually a personal trainer in real life, and my specialty is helping clients achieve weight loss, muscle gain, or both. And being a trainer for nearly 3 years now, I've grown accustomed to having a keen eye for tracking my clients' body fat percentage just by looking at them, even when they're wearing baggy clothing, as I need to make sure that the two of us are both doing what we need to do for my client to achieve their goals. So I want to use my skills to prove to you that Gojo was personally training himself inside of Prison Realm. Because while sure it's at least possible that Gojo's upper body was always this beefy and he never actually got stronger, but we know for a fact that this was not the case for his lower body. Yeah, Gojo's always kind of had string bean legs. He got caught skipping leg day, but I guess getting sealed was more than enough for him to switch that up. Gojo is wearing these same pants in both of these images, and bro, look at the difference. His quads are about to burst through the seams. Yeah, Gojo's legs have really got to be the most damning part of this new chapter. But let's get back to Gojo's upper body musculature. Sure, baggy clothes can conceal muscular builds, but that's more so like an average athletic build. The higher the muscle mass, the baggier the clothes need to be to conceal it. Just look at Gojo right here. Bro literally has the physique of a Hollywood personal trainer. You cannot hide muscle like that in a jacket like this. It would need to be either super tight so as to compress the muscle, or super large to completely cover it. This jacket was neither. It fit him well, it wasn't too slim, but it wasn't too large either. Even if you look at Gojo's traps and neck musculature, it looks far thicker and more developed than it was in the past. And when comparing his arms from last time we saw him, there was a considerable difference. His arms are sizably bigger without the jacket than with the jacket. There would only be two explanations for this. Either in the past the jacket was tight and that it actually was constricting Gojo's muscle size to be smaller, or the more likely possibility is that Gojo just spent his time training in the prison realm and muscle and strength building was one of those focuses. Because the arm by itself cannot be larger than the arm plus the jacket without a muscle gain. And when you just compare many of these images of pre-sealed Gojo to current Gojo, there seems to be a clear difference. Gojo was built like a Looney Tunes character, and now he looks like he needs to put on a gi and join the Dragon Ball cast. I'm kinda joking on that. Gojo always had an athletic build, but as I've been saying, this is a whole new level. He's gone from an athletic build to a near bodybuilding physique, which is pretty important when it comes to one of the most important debates in the fandom and my previous JJK video, Gojo versus Sukuna. I found it incredibly funny that Gojo got unsealed the same week I dropped this video, and I do think that this video right now needs to be made to address the factors I was not privy to. Some people were commenting that my video sucked because it did not include chapter 221, even though the video was completely done even before the leaks came out. Unfortunately, I am not a time traveler, guys, but I had made that video with the knowledge of only 220 chapters of JJK, and I still even theorized that Gojo would get stronger too. Yes, in the video, I thought that Gojo would become stronger. After coming out of Prison Realm, I thought he'd be training inside of it. But there is one more thing from this chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen that adds to the evidence that Gojo is now stronger, and that is from Kenjaku's reactions to Gojo being unsealed. Of course, Kenjaku is not a character who would defeat Gojo in a conventional fight. This is stated both by Kenjaku himself in the manga, as well as the JJK databook. But the shock that we see from Kenjaku in chapter 221 gives us some very interesting power scaling implications. I placed the prison realm in a subduction zone, 8,000 meters underwater, in the deepest area of the Japan Trench. I also left a cursed spirit as a detector inside layers of seals. I did all that because Tengen told me about the back. This way I could kill you if the seal disappeared. Seriously, what is with you? So we have Kenjaku, who knew how strong Gojo was in Shibuya, and we have him also believing that his setup would have been able to kill Satoru if he were to get unsealed. But that didn't happen. In fact, Gojo seemingly goes through it with ease. Now this doesn't mean that Kenjaku would scale above Shibuya Gojo per se, as it just means that in that vulnerable situation that his plan would have worked on killing Gojo, but it just seems he didn't expect Gojo to train inside the prison realm and come out of it stronger. And if you think about it this way, Gojo went from likely dying to this trap to easily getting beyond it, meaning that he didn't just get stronger, but now he is far more powerful. If you took current Gojo and set him up with Shibuya Arc Gojo, current Gojo would likely win with either little to no difficulty. So what I think happened is that Gojo obviously did some muscle and strength training while in the prison realm, but I believe that he was likely training as a typical sorcerer while in there as well, working on his cursed energy levels, cursed energy output, and his cursed technique. Now, while it's been well over 1100 days in our world, it's actually only been 19 days in the JJK timeline, so many question if Gojo really could have gotten that much stronger in such a short time frame, which I think that would be a bit of a downplay on Gojo's rate of growth, but also it was reiterated in chapter 221 that time does not flow inside a prison realm, at least not in the conventional way. Hana states that while people don't age because of the lack of physical time, when it comes to Gojo's own experience inside of it, he could either have experienced those 19 days as a single moment, or it could have felt like it was stretching out into entire centuries. This means it's fairly possible that Gojo experienced months or even years, giving him ample time to train and surpass his own limits. Now, I see a lot of people take this one panel of Gojo at the beach or this one sketch of Gojo and say that this means that Gojo has always been this buff, but this image doesn't really show anything. We don't get any good angles that display Gojo's physique. All it really does is show that Gojo is lean enough to have abs. A lot of people don't really know this. They see abs in a lean body and they automatically think of strength. But if you just look at every image, it seems far more consistent that Gojo always had an athletic lean build in the past, but these are not comparable physiques. Current Gojo is a Dragon Ball character now. Even if we compare the more cartoony images of Gojo from before and after, he looks far more muscular in those cartoony images and even his legs as well, which I believe completely restructures the way the Gojo versus Sukuna argument would need to be addressed. But first, I also wanted to discuss that it seems that the fandom has shifted their belief more toward Gojo on him winning his fight with Sukuna, and that mainly comes from Gojo calling back to chapter 3 when he first made the statement that he would be able to defeat Sukuna. Is he stronger than you, Gojo-sensei? Good question. If Sukuna were able to completely regain his power, it would be a little tough. Would you lose? Nah, I'd win. This does look pretty damning for Sukuna. Gojo can see Sukuna and even experienced a strike from him. And with Gojo's analytical abilities gathered from his 6 eyes, he should be able to reason to who he can or cannot beat. So now people automatically believe Gojo's got the W because of his own statement. But this completely ignores Sukuna's own statement. Remember, Sukuna thinks he can beat Gojo, and he reiterated this statement as well from chapter 3. We know that Sukuna has an amazing understanding of cursed energy and cursed techniques, and he also sees and experiences this new Gojo, and yet he still believes that he can win. So actually what this chapter does is it proved my previous video right, as I thought that Sukuna would beat Shibuya Gojo. But when we look at it here, Gojo just got even more powerful than before, and Sukuna still thinks that he can win, which just means that if Sukuna thinks he can beat this prison-amped Gojo, then he would probably defeat Shibuya Gojo. Case closed. But the Gojo vs Sukuna fight isn't happening inside the verse for a while, as chapter 221 took place on November 19th. But the Gojo vs Sukuna fight is now officially scheduled for December 24th, more than a month of a time gap between these points, which I think could allow for some shakeups that can change the decision in this massive battle. So let's get into some of these shakeups in Jujutsu Kaisen and the ramifications of the Gojo vs Sukuna fight. So we got Gojo vs Meguna. Both think that they can beat the other, but I also do believe that 5 weeks is a lot of time to change. Remember, Sukuna only has 15 fingers as of right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we get an arc or a mini arc leading up to this climactic final battle, with the focus on it being the remaining 5 fingers of Sukuna. Gojo might actually suggest that they try and find the remaining 5 fingers and have Yuji consume them so that Sukuna cannot reach his full power. Sure, Gojo thinks he can beat Sukuna right now, but those 5 fingers, with each of them growing stronger by the day and Sukuna growing stronger by the day, that could make a considerable difference in what will actually happen. But just as Sukuna can grow even stronger, so can Gojo. Satoru will now have another 5 weeks to grow, and one of the ways I believe he might do that is by training up the other characters around him. Yuji, Maki, Yuta, and Hikari, and maybe other characters will all train with Gojo in order to go into the final battle as strong as possible. And I do believe that characters like Yuta and Hikari would be strong enough to spar with Gojo in a 2v1 that would also be enough to help their sensei grow even stronger. And maybe if Yuji were to continue training, and maybe if actually Yuji finds the remaining 5 fingers and consumes them and then trains, maybe he will also be able to push Gojo in a 3v1, which will help Gojo get even stronger in preparation for his fight with Sukuna. But I also believe that Gojo could have grown to an even greater degree than we could have anticipated. We know that he has various techniques. He uses his limitless ability to use infinity, allowing it so that almost nothing can touch him. He has Lapse Blue, which is similar to a gravitational pull. He has Reversal Red, that acts as more of a push, and when he combines the two, he gets Hollow Purple, and that acts as a form of existence erasure. I think there could be expansions of the technique of Limitless or Infinity. Maybe Gojo will reveal even more colors, with more variance in the abilities, or maybe he'll figure out how to do the opposite of his Infinity defense. Infinity essentially infinitely slows things down as they approach Gojo, so that they never touch him. If he were to reverse it, similar to how he could do with Red and Blue, then maybe it would be something like his Infinity is infinitely spreading out, and anyone caught inside of it gets frozen in space or killed. It'd almost be like if Gojo could do like a passive Hollow Purple around him. That would be pretty busted, and maybe that'd be too overpowered, but he might need that if we're going against Sukuna, especially if Sukuna does somehow get the remaining fingers. Though I think that one thing I'd be surprised not to see is a reforged domain expansion from Gojo. His Immeasurable Void may well be the strongest domain in the series, but despite that, we know that there are characters that are better at making domains than him. Both Sukuna and Kenjaku have shown the ability to bring their own domains in the real world, and this is stated to be a divine technique that requires far more talent to make than a regular domain. We have not seen Gojo do something like this yet, but I believe that this may have been what he was working on within the prison realm. From what we know, a domain clash would be one of Gojo's greatest vulnerabilities in a battle against Sukuna. I addressed this in my previous JJK video, that the most important decider of a domain clash is the more polished domain. And since Sukuna's domains would likely be far more polished, and they were roughly the same level of power, it would be to the death throes for Gojo. But not necessarily if he were able to bring the Immeasurable Void into reality and make it even stronger, possibly pairing it with a binding vow similar to Sukuna's domain Malevolent Shrine. But what I believe could be the highlight of the looming Gojo vs Sukuna fight will be the expansion of the 6 Eyes. The Gojo Clan 6 Eyes are some of the most important things in the entire series because it is the reason for how Gojo got so strong and was able to expand upon his limitless technique. We don't really know too much about these 6 Eyes, but what little we do know is pretty interesting. They belong to the Gojo Clan and only one amongst them can wield it at a single time. They allow for incredible levels of perception and brain processing power, as well as granting Gojo infinitesimal control of his own cursed energy, which grants him nigh infinite stamina. Through fate itself, the 6 Eyes are linked with Tengen and the Star Plasma Vessel. Well, maybe not anymore after Toji broke that binding of fate, but anyways, besides that, we barely know much of anything about 6 Eyes, like why it is linked to Tengen, and why only those related to the Gojo clan have the potential to be born with it. I think that we will learn far more about 6 Eyes, with a lot of the way Gege spotlighting it with new abilities and power levels of Gojo to display against Sukuna, so I'm really on the lookout for more explanation and more powers of the 6 Eyes. I will reiterate my stance that I do believe that Gojo will lose to Sukuna, even if the greatest Jujutsu sorcerer just leveled up to be even stronger, because I think that just makes the most narrative sense. and Gege has provided not only a lot of foreshadowing that Gojo will lose, but it just so happens to have given Sukuna more than one ability in how to defeat Infinity, Gojo's greatest defense, though it may come down to one of Gojo's greatest weaknesses. I sort of alluded to this in my last JJK video, but I didn't really go over it because I didn't think it necessarily fit the spirit of that video, as I wanted to focus on Sukuna versus Gojo as more of a 1v1 bout. But one of Gojo's weaknesses is if Sukuna decided to not play fair and made it so that their fight took place in an area where there would be plenty of civilians around. This was a huge factor in the plan that actually sealed Gojo in the prison realm. I'm sort of 50-50 on this one. While Sukuna is a menace, a part of me thinks that he could have too much pride and would want to beat Gojo on his own. On the other hand, Kenjaku may force that to happen, and while Kenjaku likely doesn't hold a candle to Gojo or Sukuna when it comes to their power, he does seemingly hold a binding vow over Sukuna, so there's a chance that Sukuna might be forced to fight Gojo unfair. Though a part of me thinks that it's not even going to matter. As of right now, they are facing the possible end of society or even the world itself. I don't think Gojo is going to let innocence get in the way if this were to happen. In a sense, it would be better to, kill hundreds, maybe even thousands of innocent civilians if at the end of the day you save the entire population. I don't think Gojo is going to let innocence get in the way if this were to happen. We might see Gojo go savage mode and just kill them anyways. That might not even be a weakness to him over such an important fight. Instead, it could just end up being added trauma. If Gojo were to go crazy and kill innocents to fight Sukuna, that might even get Sukuna excited anyways and make the fight even more hype. Gojo might not even be able to go all out against Sukuna because Sukuna's in Megumi's body, and Gojo has a connection to Megumi because he sort of raised him. He did a lot of his training. He's the one who brought him in when Megumi was a very young age. So it's one of his students. It's one of his, his closest students he has. If Gojo struggles to kill, random innocent civilians that he has no connection to, then him fighting Megumi might actually be a pretty big nerf to him. But yeah, I think that whether or not Sukuna gets his last 5 fingers, he will be the victor in this fight against Gojo. Though I wouldn't be surprised if it was such a close fight that upon defeating or even killing Gojo, Sukuna would be very vulnerable, and this would allow for Yuji to take Sukuna back. Who knows, maybe he'd need to cut off one of Megumi's fingers and eat it himself, and that would allow him to take Sukuna. I think that predicting the aftermath of the fight is far harder than predicting the outcome. I know you might question why Gege would bring Gojo back just to kill him off for good, but it really would be the capstone of propelling the series forward. And just because he dies doesn't mean his return was a failure. Even if Sukuna kills him, if he's able to weaken Sukuna to the point where Yuji can take Sukuna back and thus saving Megumi, then it could be an overall success still. I don't think that Gojo's going to come back and he'll lose to Sukuna and it would be meaningless. It'll push the plot forward and he will have some successes, like I said. But I'd be very interested in hearing what you guys think. I think it's pretty clear that Gojo just got far stronger than he was back in Shibuya. But if you have any points on why he's not, I'd love to know why. Does Gojo being stronger change any of your minds on who will win the most anticipated battle in JJK history? Whether Gojo or Sukuna wins, all I can think about is how amazing this fight is going to be. It will definitely be trending everywhere, and I have full confidence that Gege will make it not only the best choreographed fight in the series, but also the best written fight of the series, until maybe the true final battle of JJK, which will probably involve Yuji. Thank you guys for supporting my JJK content, and more to come for both JJK and Black Clover, and probably even Record of Ragnarok in the near future. I finally just got caught up to the manga, and I have a lot to say about that, but with that being said, leave a like if you enjoyed, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe, turn notifications. Also, my Twitter and my Discord are linked down below, so join there if you want more of a conversation. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.